The sky over Valerian was a bruise of deep violet and gold, a heavy atmospheric curtain that made the city below look like a jewel caught in amber. From the vantage point of the High Council's terrace, the capital sprawled in dizzying geometric perfection. Sky bridges made of spun glass and light arced over the cloud seas, connecting spires that pierced the upper atmosphere like needles. Drones buzzed through the humid air like swarms of mechanical fireflies, their tiny engines humming a constant low-frequency chord that vibrated in the teeth of anyone standing too close to the edge. Lyra Vane stood perfectly still, her hands clasped behind her back in the exact manner her tutors had beaten into her posture since she was 3 cycles old. She wore the ceremonial silica weave gown of her station, a garment that shimmered with a restless, iridescent light every time she breathed. It was beautiful. It was heavy. It was a cage. Below her, guarding the primary ceremonial gate into the inner ring, a massive holographic projection dominated the skyline. It was a cold, angular warning, cycling through the 22 recognized languages of the Galactic Concordat. The message was simple, brutal, and absolute. Humans aren't allowed here. Lyra watched the words flash in the guttural script of the Krill, then the flowing glyphs of the Ethel, and finally in the blocky, primitive text of Earth Standard. She felt nothing looking at it. It was just gravity, just weather, just another immutable fact of life on Valerian. High Counselor Varric, her father and the architect of half the laws that kept their world locked in this golden stasis, stood 10 feet away. He was speaking to a delegation from the Rift Systems, his voice a smooth baritone that sounded like expensive velvet wrapped around a knife. "We believe that security is not merely a wall," Varric said, gesturing with a hand that bore the signet ring of House Vane. "It is a philosophy. The exclusion zones are necessary to preserve the purity of our culture. You have seen what happens when the younger species are given free rein. Chaos, noise, entropy." The Rift delegates nodded, their multifaceted eyes glinting. They were purchasing security drones, millions of them. Lyra shifted her weight, a microscopic movement that none of the men noticed. She was the perfect aid, silent, decorative, sharp as a diamond shard. Behind her carefully neutral expression, she was cataloging every micro-expression on the delegates' faces, noting which one was lying about his credit limits and which one was visibly sweating despite the climate control. She was bored out of her mind. The sensor node embedded in her ear cuff chimed, a high, frantic sound that only she could hear. She stiffened. It was a Priority 1 alert, bypassing the general security grid and routing directly to the Royal Network. "Anomaly detected," the synthesized voice whispered in her ear. "Atmosphere breach in Sector 4. Trajectory impact imminent." Lyra glanced at her father. He was laughing at a joke made by the Rift ambassador, completely oblivious. The Royal Network was designed to filter out noise for the leadership, only alerting them to confirmed threats. But Lyra had tweaked her own access protocols months ago, a small rebellion that allowed her to see the raw data before the filters scrubbed it. She tapped her wrist link, projecting a holographic map visible only to her contact lenses. A red streak was tearing through the upper ionosphere. It was moving too fast for a meteorite and too erratically for a drone. It was a ship, and it was going to crash directly into the old hydro processing plant, a restricted infrastructure zone that had been automated for 50 years. "Father," Lyra said. Varric did not turn. "Not now." "Lyra, it is a security matter," she pressed, keeping her voice low. "A guidance system failure in Sector 4. I should ensure the automated defenses do not cause collateral damage to the ambassador's transport route. It was a lie, smooth and practiced." Varric waved a dismissive hand. Go, handle it. Do not disturb us unless the sky falls. Lyra bowed, turned, and walked calmly toward the exit. The moment the blast doors hissed shut behind her, she broke into a run. The crash site smelled of ozone and burning copper. The old hydro processing plant was a labyrinth of rusted pipes and bioluminescent moss, a forgotten industrial graveyard on the edge of the pristine inner ring. The fog here was thick, swirling around Lyra's ankles as she navigated the slippery gantries. She had taken a maintenance skimmer, pushing its engine to the red line to get here before the official patrols. Curiosity was a dangerous vice in House Vane, but Lyra had always possessed too much of it. The object that had fallen from the sky was not on any flight plan. It had no transponder. She found the impact crater near the intake valves of a massive water turbine. The ship was small, scorched black, and shaped like a jagged tear. It looked nothing like the elegant, curved aesthetics of Valerian engineering. This was a brute force machine, built of heavy alloys and welded seams. Lyra approached cautiously, her hand resting on the localized gravity disruptor concealed in her sash. The ship was smoking. The canopy had been shattered, shards of reinforced glass scattered across the mossy ground like diamonds. She climbed over the twisted fuselage, peering into the cockpit. It was empty. Blood smeared the control console, bright, oxygen-rich red blood. Red. Lyra froze. There was only one species that bled that specific shade of iron red. A noise came from behind a stack of cooling coils. It was a groan, followed by the sharp clang of metal on metal. Lyra spun around, drawing the disruptor. "Come out," she commanded, her voice steady. "You are in a restricted zone." A figure emerged from the shadows, stumbling slightly. He was tall, wearing a flight suit that had been scorched gray and torn at the shoulder. He held one hand against his side, blood seeping through his fingers. His face was smeared with soot, but beneath the grime, his features were shockingly symmetric. He had no ridges on his forehead, no scales, no second set of eyelids. He was human. The realization hit Lyra like a physical blow. A human. Here, inside the inner ring, it was impossible. The orbital defense grid vaporized unauthorized matter before it even hit the mesosphere. The human looked at her. He blinked, his eyes a startlingly clear hazel, and then he grimaced, leaning heavily against the pipe. "Okay," he wheezed. "I know I parked in a loading zone, but you don't have to pull a gun on me." Lyra did not lower the weapon. "You are human, guilty," he said. He tried to straighten up, but his knees buckled. He caught himself, exhaling a sharp breath through his teeth. "And you are very shiny. Is that diamond dust? Identify yourself," Lyra snapped. "How did you bypass the grid?" The human laughed, a dry hacking sound that turned into a cough. "I didn't bypass anything. My navigation drive had a seizure. 1 minute I'm running a diagnostic in the drift. The next minute I'm falling through your clouds." He took a step forward, and a proximity sensor on the wall above him shrieked. A red laser grid snapped into existence, scanning the area. "Warning." A mechanical voice boomed. "Biological contaminant detected and patrol drones dispatched. ETA 2 minutes. The human looked up at the red light, panic finally cutting through his haze of pain. "That sounds bad." Lyra looked at him, then at the sky. She could hear the whine of patrol drones in the distance. If they found him, they would not arrest him. They would incinerate him. The law was absolute. Humans aren't allowed here. She looked at his face. He wasn't a soldier. He didn't have the hardened, dead-eyed look of the mercenaries her father warned her about. He looked terrified, exhausted, and stupidly defiant. "If the patrol arrives, you are dead," Lyra said. The human looked at her. holding his bleeding side. So, welcome to your beautiful planet. Lyra made a choice. She didn't know why. Perhaps it was the boredom. Perhaps it was the sheer impossibility of him standing there. She holstered the disruptor and grabbed his good arm. "Move," she ordered. She dragged him away from the main gantry, shoving him toward a maintenance hatch that was overgrown with glowing purple vines. He stumbled, heavy and awkward, his boots clanging on the metal. "Wait," he said, trying to keep up with her surprisingly strong grip. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere the drones cannot see," she hissed. "Be quiet." She placed her palm against the hatch. The metal rippled, recognizing her genetic signature. The Vane bloodline commanded the city's architecture as easily as it commanded its people. The hatch dissolved into a swarm of nanites, opening a dark maw in the wall. Lyra shoved him inside and followed, the hatch sealing instantly behind them just as the roar of engines swept over the crash site outside. The tunnel was narrow, lined with bioluminescent veins that pulsed with a soft, rhythmic blue light. It was the circulatory system of the city, pumping nutrient fluid to the living architecture above. The human slid down the wall, his legs finally giving out. He hit the floor with a groan, clutching his side. The flight suit was soaked with blood now. Lyra stood over him, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had just committed treason, high treason. If her father knew, she would be wiped from the family registry before the sun set. She knelt beside him. "Let me see." He tried to wave her away. "It's just a scratch. Something sharp in the cockpit gave me a kiss on the way down." "Remove your hand," Lyra said, her tone leaving no room for argument. He hesitated, then pulled his bloody hand away. There was a deep laceration just above his hip. It was ugly, but it hadn't hit an artery. Lyra reached into the hidden pocket of her sash and pulled out a small silver disc. It was a cellular regeneration patch, technology that House Vane hoarded for the elite. It was worth more than the ship he had just crashed. "This will hurt," she said. "Wait, what is..." She slapped the disc directly onto the wound. The human yelled, a strangled sound that echoed down the tunnel. His back arched off the floor, his teeth clenched tight. The patch hissed, weaving synthetic skin and numbing agents directly into the nerve endings. "Breathe," Lyra said, watching the color drain from his face and then slowly return. He gasped, his head thumping back against the wall. That wasn't medicine. That was an exorcism. "It stopped the bleeding," Lyra said coolly. She tapped her wrist link again, accessing the city's logs. She found the entry for the crash site and highlighted it, with a few rapid blinks to trigger the retinal commands. She rewrote the sensor data. Meteorite impact. Debris cleared. No biologicals found. She looked back at him. He was watching her, his eyes focused on the glowing interface hovering above her wrist. "You're wiping the tapes," he said. He sounded impressed. "I am saving your life," she corrected. "And mine. If they find you, they will ask how you survived the impact. If they find me with you, they won't bother asking anything." He managed a weak smile. "I'm Elias. Elias Thorne. I'm an engineer. I fix terraforming units. I'm not a spy, I promise." "I am Lyra Vane," she said, the name automatic, a shield she used against everyone. Elias Thorne looked at her sparkling dress, at the elaborate crystal pins holding her silver hair in place, and then at the bioluminescent grime smearing the hem of her gown. "Lyra Vane," he repeated. "Sounds fancy. And judging by the dress, you're either a princess or a very expensive chandelier." "I am the daughter of the High Council," Lyra said, attempting to instill the fear that usually accompanied her title. "Oh," Elias said. "So, Your sparkly highness. Lyra felt a strange twitch at the corner of her mouth. She suppressed it immediately. Do not call me that. Right, Elias said. Just your highness. Got it. Can you stand? She asked. We cannot stay here. The maintenance cycles flush these tunnels in 1 hour. If we are here, we will be dissolved into nutrient paste. Elias's eyes widened. You people really have a harsh way of dealing with loitering. He took her hand, his grip rough and warm, calloused from work. It was a shock to her skin. Alien skin on Valerian was smooth, cool, perfected by generations of genetic tampering. His hand felt like raw geology. He pulled himself up, swaying. He was taller than her, broad-shouldered but lean. Where are you taking me? He asked. To a place where gravity forgets to work. Lyra said, the abandoned observation shrine was a relic of the pre-unification era, a dome of glass and stone perched on the underside of a massive sky bridge. It had been built to worship the void, and the gravity generators inside were permanently set to a low-flow state. They slipped inside, the air cool and still. As soon as they crossed the threshold, the weight of the world lifted. Dust motes floated in the air like suspended gold. Lyra felt her heavy gown drift around her legs as if she were underwater. Elias pushed off the ground and floated a few inches into the air, his eyes wide with wonder. Okay, he whispered. This is cool. This is very cool. Lyra sat on a floating stone bench watching him. He was spinning slowly, looking at the panoramic view of the dark city beneath the bridge. Sit down, Elias, she said. You need to rest. He grabbed a railing and pulled himself down, hovering cross-legged in the air opposite her. He looked at her, really looked at her, without the panic of the crash. Why? He asked suddenly. Why what? Why help me? You saw that sign. Humans aren't allowed. I've heard stories about this place. They say the Vane family eats trespassers for breakfast. Lyra looked at her hands. They say a lot of things. You're not what the propaganda says, Elias observed. You're terrifying, sure, and you clearly run this place. But you didn't leave me to burn. And you are not what my tutors described, Lyra countered. She studied his face, the stubble on his jaw, the intelligence in his eyes. I was told humans were primitive, savage, that you communicated mostly in grunts and violence. Elias snorted. I mean, have you met my cousin Dave? Your tutors might be half right, but most of us just want to fix engines and get paid. A sudden booming sound echoed from the city above. It was a public broadcast, amplified across the entire sector. Attention, citizens. A biological contaminant has breached the inner ring. The entity is confirmed as human. Class 1 threat. Terrorist infiltrator. All citizens are to report suspicious activity immediately. Lyra's stomach dropped. Terrorist. They were escalating the narrative already. A single crash was being spun into an invasion. Elias went pale. Terrorist? I'm carrying a wrench and a ham sandwich. It does not matter what you are carrying, Lyra said, her voice tight. It matters what they need you to be. My father needs a threat. He needs a reason to increase military spending and lock down the borders. You are his reason. She stood up, floating slightly, and reached out to check the patch on his side. Her fingers brushed the skin of his waist. He flinched, not from pain, but from the contact. She froze. He froze. For a second, the silence in the shrine was deafening. She was close enough to smell the smoke on his clothes, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes. He was looking at her with an expression she had never seen directed at her before. It wasn't deference. It wasn't fear. It was awe. You have blood on your hands, Lyra whispered. She meant literally. His hands were still stained from the crash. Elias looked at her, his voice dropping an octave, soft and rough. Yeah, I guess I do. Lyra pulled a cloth from her sash, a silken thing meant for cleaning ceremonial daggers, and took his hand. She wiped the dried blood from his knuckles, her movements precise and gentle. He watched her, his breath hitching slightly. Lyra felt her own pulse spike, a traitorous rhythm against her ribs. This was dangerous. This was more dangerous than the crash. She pulled back abruptly, turning away to hide the flush rising in her cheeks. "You stay here," she said, her voice commanding again. "Do not leave this shrine. The glass is shielded. Scanners cannot penetrate it." Elias floated there, watching her back. "Can I at least fix the heater? It's freezing in here." Lyra glanced back. "There is no heater. It is a stone temple." Elias pointed to a panel on the wall. "That's a thermal regulator. It's just bypassed. Give me 5 minutes and I can hotwire the conduit to bleed some heat from the main grid." "You will do no such thing," Lyra said. "You will sit. You will heal. You will not touch alien technology that you do not understand." Elias smirked. "I understood that patch you slapped on me pretty well. It was a molecular knitter, right? Based on fungal rapid growth cycles." Lyra stared at him. "How could you possibly know that?" "I told you," Elias said, tapping his temple. "Engineer, tech is tech, Your Highness. Doesn't matter if it's from Earth or wherever we are. It all follows the same rules." She looked at him, realizing he was not just an inconvenience. He was clever, inconveniently brave. "I have to go," she said. "I must return to the palace before my absence is noted. If I am not there to pour the ceremonial wine, my father will suspect something." She walked to the door. Elias called out, "Hey, Lyra." She stopped, hand on the frame. "Thank you," he said. She didn't look back. "Just stay alive." Elias. Lyra returned to the palace through the service corridors, slipping into her quarters just long enough to change her soiled gown. She scrubbed the grime from her skin, reapplied the shimmer dust to her cheeks, and walked into the banquet hall exactly 3 minutes late. Her father was still holding court. He looked at her as she entered, his eyes cold. "You took your time," Varric said. The automated defenses were sluggish. Lyra lied smoothly, taking her place at his side. "I had to manually reset the perimeter sensors to ensure the debris field was contained." Varric nodded, accepting the lie because it confirmed his belief that everyone but him was incompetent. "Good. And the intruder?" "Vaporized," Lyra said. "Nothing left but ash." "Excellent." Varric turned back to the Rift ambassador. "As I was saying, the human threat is persistent, but manageable with the right fortitude." Lyra stood there, the perfect porcelain doll, but her mind was racing. She needed to know why Elias was here. He said his navigation drive failed, but ships didn't just fall into the inner ring by accident. The magnetic shielding around the capital was impenetrable, unless it invited you in. Late that night, while the palace slept, Lyra sat in her private data sanctum. She pulled up the raw telemetry data she had copied from Elias's ship before fleeing the crash site. She ran the diagnostic algorithms, watching the code cascade down her screen. Navigation failure. Confirmed. Cause. External override. Lyra frowned. She traced the source of the override signal. It wasn't a random anomaly. It was a focused, high-frequency tractor beam that had locked onto Elias's ship while he was in the drift and yanked him violently off course. She traced the origin of the beam. It came from Valerian. Specifically, it came from the Royal Spire. Her breath caught in her throat. She queried the authorization code for the beam. It required a genetic key to activate. The screen flashed. Authorization. House Vane. User. High Counselor Varek. Lyra stared at the screen, the light reflecting in her eyes. It wasn't an accident. Elias hadn't crashed. He had been fished out of the stars and dragged down to Earth. Her father hadn't just used the crash as a political opportunity. He had manufactured it. She looked out her window toward the dark underbelly of the sky bridge where the shrine was hidden. Elias was down there, thinking he was a victim of bad luck. But he was bait. And she had just hidden the bait where her father couldn't find it. Lyra touched the cold glass of the window. The game had changed. It wasn't just a rescue anymore. It was a conspiracy. And for the first time in her life, Lyra Vane was on the wrong side of the law. She smiled, a sharp, dangerous expression that shattered her perfect mask. Good. Lyra returned to the abandoned observation shrine with the silence of a ghost. The heavy blast doors sliding shut behind her to seal out the hum of the city. The air inside was cool and still, preserved in its low-gravity stasis. But the atmosphere between her and the human felt charged, heavy with the weight of the data she had just uncovered in the palace. Elias was floating a few feet off the ground near the ceiling, tinkering with the exposed wiring of a light fixture. He looked down as she entered, his expression shifting from focused curiosity to relief. "You came back," he said, dropping lightly to the floor. His boots made a soft thud on the stone. "I was starting to think I was going to starve to death in a floating glass box, which, for the record, is a very poetic way to die." Lyra did not smile. She walked toward him, the hem of her dark maintenance cloak swirling around her ankles. She stopped 3 feet away, close enough to see the fatigue bruising the skin under his eyes. "You lied to me," she said. Her voice was low, echoing slightly in the vast, empty space. Elias stiffened. His playful demeanor evaporated. "I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you everything. You said your navigation drive failed." Lyra pressed, stepping closer. "You said it was an accident, but I pulled the telemetry from your black box. You were not drifting. Elias, you were hunting. You were tracking a signal." Elias looked away, his jaw tightening. He ran a hand through his messy hair, a nervous habit she was beginning to recognize. "There were distress calls," he said quietly. "What kind of distress calls?" "Human ones." Elias met her gaze, and the intensity in his hazel eyes stopped her cold. 6 months ago, a mining transport vanished near the border of your sector. 50 people, families, engineers like me. The official report said it was a reactor breach, vaporized, no bodies to recover. Lyra felt a chill that had nothing to do with the shrine's temperature. "And you do not believe that?" "I know it's a lie," Elias said. 2 days ago, we picked up a faint repeating signal on a frequency that shouldn't exist. It was an old Earth emergency code. It was coming from inside your inner ring." He took a step toward her, his voice rising with frustration. "I didn't crash on purpose, Lyra. But I didn't come here to look at the scenery. I came to find them." Lyra stared at him. The pieces were clicking together in her mind, forming a picture she desperately did not want to see. Her father's sudden interest in security borders, the increased budget for the exclusion zones, and the tractor beam that had reeled Elias in the moment he got too close. "You walked into a trap," she whispered. "Yeah, well," Elias shrugged, wincing as the movement pulled at his bandaged side. "I'm starting to realize that." Lyra reached into the bag she had slung over her shoulder. She pulled out a nutrient bar wrapped in silver foil and a bundle of fabric that shimmered like oil on water. "Eat," she commanded, tossing him the food. "And put this on. We cannot stay here." Elias caught the bar and tore it open, devouring half of it in one bite before looking at the fabric. "What is it?" "A kinetic distortion cloak," Lyra explained. "It bends light around the wearer. It is standard issue for Royal Intelligence, but this one is damaged. It is the best I could steal without triggering an inventory alert." Elias shook out the cloak. It was heavy, the material feeling more like liquid metal than cloth. He draped it over his shoulders and pulled the hood up. Immediately, his silhouette blurred. To Lyra's eyes, he looked like a smear of static, a glitch in the air. Then, the cloak hummed, sparks flew from the collar, and the camouflage recalibrated violently. For a solid 10 seconds, Elias glowed with a blinding, bright yellow luminescence. He looked down at himself. "I look like a lamp." "It is calibrating," Lyra said, pressing her lips together to suppress a laugh that bubbled up in her chest. "I look like distinct glowing furniture," Elias complained. "If we are trying to blend in, I hope we are going to a store that sells very large light bulbs." "Just wait," Lyra snapped, though the corner of her mouth twitched. The yellow glow faded, settling into a dull, shifting gray that matched the stone walls. It wasn't perfect if he moved too fast. He trailed pixels like a bad transmission, but it would hide his human features from the passive scanners. "Come," Lyra said. "We need to move. Where are we going?" "Down," she said. "To the underside. If there are missing humans in this city, the only people who would know are the ones the Council pretends do not exist." The underside of Valerian was a world away from the crystalline spires and violet skies of the upper city. Here, deep beneath the foundational plates of the capital, the air was thick with steam and the smell of frying spices and ozone. They moved through the narrow alleyways along the neon canals, where the water was black and oily, reflecting the chaotic signage of 1,000 unauthorized shops. Lyra kept her hood up, her hand resting instinctively on the stun baton concealed in her sleeve. Elias walked beside her, the cloak rendering him a vague, shadowy bulk. The crowd was a dense, shifting mass of species from the outer systems, scavengers, traders, and exiles who lived in the unchecked margins of the law. Drones here were not the elegant fireflies of the palace. They were rusted, clunky things that buzzed angrily over the market stalls, advertising illicit wares. Lyra navigated the chaos with practiced ease, though her heart hammered against her ribs. She had never been this deep in the underside before. It was a place her father called a tumor. But as she walked, she saw life. She saw a four-armed mechanic welding a prosthetic limb for a child. She saw vendors selling noodles that smelled of star anise and sulfur. It was dirty, loud, and vibrantly alive. "Stay close," she murmured to Elias. "Do not speak. If they hear your accent, we are finished." Elias nodded, his face hidden in the shadow of the hood. He bumped into her shoulder as a massive, scaled transport beast lumbered past, carrying crates of unrefined ore. Lyra grabbed his wrist to steady him, pulling him into the alcove of a closed shop. Her fingers wrapped around his forearm, feeling the solid warmth of him through the fabric of the cloak. The contact was electric. It sent a jolt through her that had nothing to do with the danger and everything to do with the man. She didn't let go immediately. She told herself it was for safety, to keep him from getting lost in the crush. But her thumb grazed the pulse point on his wrist. It was beating fast. "You are walking too stiffly," she whispered, leaning close to his ear so her voice wouldn't carry. "You walk like a soldier on parade. Loosen up. You are supposed to be a drifter." Elias leaned back, his voice a low rumble near her cheek. "Hard to loosen up when I'm walking next to royalty." Every time you glare at someone, they look like they want to apologize for existing. I do not glare, Lyra whispered back, though she knew she did. It was her armor. You're doing it right now, Elias teased. Stop smiling like that. Lyra frowned, confused. Like what? Like you already belong here, Elias said softly. Like you're not just a tourist in the mud. Lyra pulled her hand away as if his skin had burned her. The accusation hit a nerve she didn't know was exposed. She had always felt like a stranger in the high towers of her father's palace. A perfectly polished ornament that didn't quite fit the design. Here, in the grime and the noise, she felt strangely invisible, and being invisible felt like freedom. She turned abruptly, hiding the flush that darkened her silver-dusted cheeks. We are here, she said, pointing to a shop with a flickering holographic sign that read, Mnemazin, memories bought and sold. The shop was a cave of glass shelves. Inside, thousands of small, sealed vials glowed with faint, swirling lights. Each vial contained a harvested memory, extracted from the willing or the desperate, preserved in suspension fluid. The proprietor was a spindly, multi-eyed creature that hung from the ceiling in a harness of brass and leather. He descended as they entered, his many eyes blinking out of sync. We are closed, the creature hissed. We are not buying, Lyra said, lowering her hood just enough to reveal the sharp, aristocratic line of her jaw and the signet ring on her finger. We are looking for information. The creature's eyes widened. A vein? In the gutter? The universe must be ending. I am looking for shipments, Lyra said, her voice turning cold and authoritative. Cargo that does not exist, crates that move at night, unmarked, heading for the medical district. The creature chittered, a nervous sound. I know nothing of such things. I sell nostalgia, highborn, not secrets. Lyra stepped forward. She did not threaten him with a weapon. She threatened him with something far worse. If you lie to me, Lyra said calmly, I will have the health and sanitation department audit this establishment. I will have them check every vial for contamination protocols. They will burn this place to the ground by morning. The creature recoiled, hissing. You are cruel, highborn. I am efficient, Lyra corrected. Speak. The creature lowered its voice. There are movements. Late at night, armored convoys. They do not go to the medical district. They go to the royal biolabs, the ones beneath the citadel. What is inside them? Elias asked, forgetting to stay silent. The creature looked at the blurred figure of the human. I do not look inside, stranger, but I hear things. I hear dreaming. Dreaming? Lyra asked. The cargo, the creature whispered. It sleeps, but it screams in its sleep. Lyra felt the blood drain from her face. She turned to Elias. We need to go. Now. They were moving back toward the surface, taking the service ramps that spiraled up through the city's infrastructure when they saw it. Lyra pulled Elias behind a stack of shipping containers as a low hum vibrated through the metal grating of the floor. Look, she breathed. Below them, on a suspended highway reserved for official government use, a convoy was passing. It was a line of sleek, black transport skiffs, floating silently on anti-grav cushions. They were not carrying ore or supplies. They were carrying coffins, hundreds of them, elegant, translucent pods stacked in neat rows, glowing with a soft amber light. Inside each pod, a silhouette was visible, humanoid forms, suspended in stasis gel. Elias made a strangled noise in his throat. He surged forward, his hands gripping the railing. That's them, he hissed. That's the crew. Lyra grabbed his shoulder, hauling him back. Get down! I can see the uniforms, Elias said, his voice shaking with rage. That's the mining insignia. They're right there. He reached for his belt, as if he could stop a military convoy with a wrench and bad intentions. Stop it, Lyra hissed, pinning him against the container. Look at the drones. Elias, look at them. Elias froze, following her gaze. Flanking the convoy were heavy combat drones. Their chassis painted a gleaming white, emblazoned on the side of every drone, in sharp gold relief, was a symbol, a stylized sun eclipsed by a dagger, the crest of House Vane. The breath went out of Elias. He slumped back against the metal wall, the fight draining out of him as the reality settled in. It wasn't just a rogue operation. It was her family, her father. Lyra watched the convoy disappear into the tunnel leading to the palace foundations. She felt a nausea rising in her throat. She had grown up seeing that crest on hospitals, on schools, on charity gala invitations. Seeing it now, guarding a procession of stolen lives, made her feel physically ill. We have to stop them, Elias said. We have to blow the tunnel. If we disrupt the track, no. Lyra interrupted, her voice hard. If you attack now, the drones will shred you in 3 seconds. And even if you succeed, my father will just claim they were terrorists. He will erase the evidence and kill the prisoners to silence them. So we just watch? Elias demanded, turning on her. His eyes were wild. We just watch them get shipped off to a lab? We need proof, Lyra said. Irrefutable proof. We need to know what they are doing to them. I know what they're doing, Elias shouted, though he kept his volume checked. They're trafficking people. Lyra grabbed the lapels of his cloak and yanked him closer. The space between the containers was narrow, forcing them together. Do not yell at me, she said, her voice trembling with a fury that matched his own. Do you think I want this? That is my name on those drones, Elias. That is my inheritance. If this comes out, my life is over. My family is destroyed. Elias stared down at her. The anger in his face softened into something more complex, confusion, and a sudden, sharp realization of what she was risking. He looked at her hands, still clutching his cloak. He looked at her face, inches from his own. The air in the niche was stale and hot, recycling the exhaust from the city below. But in that moment, the world narrowed down to the two of them. You're shaking, he said quietly. I am terrified, Lyra admitted. She didn't let go. Elias raised his hands. For a heartbeat, they hovered near her waist, uncertain. He wanted to touch her. She could see it in the way his pupils dilated, the way his breath hitched. She wanted him to. God. She wanted him to. She wanted to be held by someone who saw her, not the title. His hands settled, not on her waist, but on her shoulders, lightly, a grounding touch. We're going to fix this, he said. The proximity was unbearable. The heat of him radiated through the shimmering cloak. Lyra found herself leaning in, drawn by a magnetic pull she couldn't name. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes, asking a question she wasn't ready to answer. A patrol drone buzzed overhead, casting a sweeping blue light across the tops of the containers. The moment shattered. Lyra pulled away, gasping as if coming up for air. She turned her back to him, pressing her forehead against the cold metal of the container. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might bruise her ribs. Stupid, she muttered to herself. She forced a laugh, a brittle, sharp sound. If you are going to look at me like that, at least turn off the glitch on your cloak. You are flickering like a broken neon sign. It ruins the mood. Behind her, Elias let out a breathy, shaky laugh. Right. Sorry. I'll try to be less static. Lyra turned back to him. Her face was composed again. the mask back in place. I need to go to the palace, she said. What? Elias stepped forward. You can't go back there. I have to, Lyra said. The convoy went to the biolabs. The access codes for that sector are physically air-gapped. They are not on the network. They are in my father's private archives. It's suicide, Elias said. It is politics, Lyra corrected. I am still the dutiful daughter. I will walk in through the front door. I will smile, and I will steal the keys to the kingdom. The transition from the grime of the underside to the polished marble of the royal palace was jarring. Lyra walked through the hall of mirrors, her reflection fracturing into 1,000 perfect silent images. The palace was beautiful. It was silent. It was dead. She saw it now with new eyes. The towering columns were not just architecture, they were the bars of a cage. The silence was not peace. It was the suppression of everything messy and real. She found her father in his study, a room dominated by a massive wall of viewing screens displaying the city's defense grids. Varric stood with his back to her, watching a simulation of an orbital blockade. Ah, Lyra, he said, not turning. You have returned. Father, Lyra said, sinking into a curtsy. Varric turned. His face was unreadable, carved from the same cold stone as the palace. We are moving forward with the initiative. The council is voting tomorrow on the Human Exclusion Act. I expect you to stand by my side when the announcement is made. Of course, Lyra said. And there will be a strike, Varric continued, a defensive measure. We have intelligence that human insurgents are massing near the border. We will strike them before they can attack us. Lyra felt a cold stone settle in her stomach. He was talking about the rescue ships, the families looking for their lost kin. He was going to slaughter them and call it defense. That sounds prudent, Lyra said, tasting bile. Varric stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. It was a heavy, possessive weight. You are the future of this house. Lyra, you must be strong. The universe is a garden, but we must weed it to keep it beautiful. I understand. Father, go, Varric said. Prepare yourself. Lyra left the study, her hands trembling. She walked directly to the restricted archives on the lower level. 2 guards stood at the door. They straightened as she approached. Lady Lyra, one said, this area is restricted to level 5 clearance. I am acting on my father's orders. Lyra lied, her voice bored and imperious. He requires the hard copy treaties for the rift negotiation. Do you wish to explain to him why I returned empty-handed? The guards hesitated, then stepped aside. The doors hissed open. Lyra entered the archives. She didn't go for the treaties. She went to the secure vault in the back, where the biological keys were kept. The vault required a genetic sample. She pressed her palm to the scanner. It flashed green. Inside, resting on a velvet pillow, was a living sigil. It looked like a beetle made of liquid mercury. It was a shifting biomechanical key that could unlock any door in the city, including the biolabs. She picked it up. It was cold. She couldn't carry it out. The scanners at the exit would detect it. She took a deep breath, rolled up her sleeve, and placed the beetle against the inside of her forearm. Accept, she whispered. The sigil woke up. It burrowed. Lyra bit her lip so hard she tasted blood. The pain was blinding, a searing hot needle sliding under her skin as the device dissolved its carapace and integrated into her nervous system. It was a monstrous piece of biotech, something her tutors had warned her about, a violation of the body's sanctity. She watched as the lump moved under her skin, settling near her elbow, invisible to the naked eye but burning like a brand. She pulled her sleeve down, wiping the sweat from her forehead. She walked out of the archives, offering a polite nod to the guards. When she returned to the shrine, Elias was pacing. He had taken off the cloak and was watching the city lights with a restless energy. He spun around as the doors opened. "You're back." Lyra nodded, leaning against the doorframe. She felt drained, her arm throbbing in time with her heartbeat. "Did you get it?" Elias asked. Lyra tapped her forearm. "It is inside." Elias looked confused, then horrified as he realized what she meant. "You put it in you?" "It was the only way," she said. Elias shook his head. "You're crazy. You know that? You're actually crazy." "I learned from the best," she said, managing a weak smile. Elias walked over to the console he had been tinkering with. "While you were gone, I was busy too. I hacked the lens on the cloak." He tapped a key. A hologram sprang up in the center of the room. It was shaky, grainy footage, the view from the niche where they had hidden. It showed the convoy. It showed the sleep coffins. And then, Elias zoomed in. The image blurred, then sharpened on the side of one of the coffins. There was a manifest scrawled on the glass in digital marker. Subject 45A. Memory wipe scheduled. Destination, neural harvesting. "Neural harvesting," Lyra whispered. "They are not just imprisoning them. They are taking their minds. They're stealing memories," Elias said, his voice hard. "Probably to sell on the black market or use for psychological warfare. That's why the official stories are always so perfect. They're rewriting the truth using the pieces of people they stole." He looked at Lyra. "We have the proof. We have the convoy, the crest, the manifest." Lyra looked at the hologram. It was damning. It was enough to start a war, or end one. She walked over to the edge of the shrine, looking out at the city. It looked different now. It looked like a facade. "I am tired, Elias," she said softly. He came to stand beside her. "Tired of running? Tired of being a symbol," she said. "All my life, I have been the daughter, the heir, the image of perfection. I smiled when I was told to smile. I ignored the things I was told to ignore. I thought I was protecting my people, but I was just a garnish on a plate of rot." Elias leaned against the railing, his shoulder brushing hers. "I know the feeling. Back home, I'm just a number. Employee 849, taxpayer, statistic. Governments look at people like us and see fuel. They grind us down until we're just dust in the engine." He turned to face her. "But you're not a symbol. Lyra, you're the woman who pulled me out of a burning ship. You're the one who dragged me through the mud to save my life." Lyra looked up at him. The fear was still there, but beneath it, something stronger was taking root, a resolve that felt like iron. She reached out and took his hand. This time, she didn't let go. She interlaced her fingers with his, the alien cool of her skin against the human warmth of his. "I won't let them take you," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it rang with the finality of a vow. "I will burn this entire city down if I have to. But they will not put you in a box." Elias squeezed her hand. "Then let's light the match." A chime sounded from Lyra's wrist link. It was a priority alert. She looked down. The screen was flashing red. Security breach detected. Archive vault. Biometric anomaly. ID. Lyra Vane. Status. Compromised. Lyra stared at the words. The system had found the trace of the sigil. It hadn't stopped her at the door, but it had flagged the anomaly in the post-scan her family knew. Elias saw the red light reflecting in her eyes. "What is it?" Lyra looked up at him. "The time for hiding is over." She showed him the screen. "They know," she said. As she spoke, the lights in the city sector outside the shrine flickered and died, plunging the world into darkness. Then, in the distance, the wail of sirens began to rise, getting louder, getting closer. "They are coming," Lyra said, drawing her stun baton. Elias grabbed a heavy wrench from the floor, his grip tightening. "Good," he said. "I was getting tired of hiding anyway." The warning from the security grid was not a scream, but a whisper. The red light on Lyra's wrist link pulsed once, a heartbeat of pure panic, before the glass walls of the abandoned observation shrine exploded inward. There was no sound of engines, no roar of thrusters. The attack was terrifyingly silent. 3 figures dropped from the ceiling cables, moving with the fluid, impossible grace of liquid mercury poured from a jar. They were not soldiers. They were royal justiciars, assassins bred by the High Council for matters of internal discretion. They wore suits of matte white armor that absorbed light, their faces hidden behind porcelain masks that bore no features, only a single vertical slit for a sensor array. Elias froze, the heavy wrench in his hand suddenly looking ridiculous against such lethal perfection. "Get back!" Lyra screamed. She did not reach for a gun. She reached for the ornamental pins in her hair. With a snap of her wrist, she pulled 2 long crystalline needles free. As her fingers brushed the activation studs, the crystals hummed and elongated, projecting blades of hard light that sizzled with violet energy. The first assassin lunged for Elias, a silent blur of motion. Lyra intercepted him. She moved not like a brawler, but like a dancer trained in the deadly court arts of the Vane lineage. She spun, her gown flaring, and brought the light blade down in a parry that sent a shower of sparks cascading across the stone floor. The impact shuddered through her arm, but she used the momentum to pivot and unleash a gravity pulse from her sash. The localized gravity wave hit the assassin in the chest. He was thrown backward, slamming into the stone pillar with a bone-jarring crack. "Run!" Lyra commanded, placing herself between Elias and the remaining 2 attackers. "To the bridge." Elias did not argue. He scrambled toward the shattered rear exit, slipping on the glass debris. Lyra held the line. The second assassin feinted left, then struck right with a monofilament whip that could shear through steel. Lyra ducked, the whip singing over her head and slicing a stone statue of an ancient god cleanly in half. She countered with a thrust of her light blade, but the third assassin was already flanking her. He was fast, faster than the palace guards, faster than anything she had practiced against in the sparring rings. He kicked her, a precise blow to the ribs that knocked the wind out of her. Lyra stumbled, gasping, her vision swimming. The assassin raised a silver baton, the tip glowing with stun charge. Elias roared. The human had not run. He had circled back. He swung the heavy iron wrench with all the desperate, ungraceful force of a terrified engineer. The metal clanged against the assassin's helmet, a dull, ugly sound that lacked all elegance. The assassin staggered, stunned more by the audacity of the attack than the force of it. "Come on!" Elias yelled, grabbing Lyra's arm. He hauled her up, and they bolted through the broken glass doors, sprinting out onto the sky bridge that connected the shrine to the lower transit spires. The bridge was a ribbon of transparent polymer suspended 2,000 feet above the cloud sea. The wind whipped at them, tearing at Lyra's torn gown and Elias's cloak. Behind them, the assassins recovered. They did not run. They engaged their grav boots and skated across the bridge, closing the distance with terrifying speed. "They are going to catch us," Elias shouted over the wind. Lyra looked ahead. The bridge connected to a spire 500 yards away, and they would never make it. She looked at the support cables singing in the wind. "Do you trust me?" she asked. Elias looked at the drop, then at the killers behind them. "No, but I am open to suggestions. But I am open to..." Lyra reached into her sash and pulled out a small, spherical device, a structural dampener. She armed it and threw it at the bridge section beneath their feet. "Jump!" she screamed. She grabbed Elias and threw herself over the railing into the open air. Behind them, the dampener detonated. It did not create fire. It canceled the molecular bonds of the polymer. The section of the bridge they had just been standing on turned to dust, shattering the path and sending the pursuing assassins skidding to a halt at the edge of the abyss. Lyra and Elias fell. The wind roared in their ears, a deafening thunder. The violet clouds rushed up to meet them, cold and wet. Elias was flailing, shouting something lost to the gale. Lyra tucked her limbs in, diving to catch up to him. She grabbed his harness, the jolt nearly dislocating her shoulder. "Connect to me," she yelled, slamming her magnetic belt against his waist clasp. Elias fumbled with freezing fingers, locking the buckles together. They were tumbling through the mist now, the city lights above them fading into a blur. Lyra hit the emergency stud on her sash. The gravity chute deployed. It was not a parachute, but a sphere of reverse kinetic energy. It caught them with a brutal jerk, slowing their descent from terminal velocity to a survivable drop in 3 seconds. They slammed into a lower-level landing pad, rolling across the wet metal mesh before coming to a stop against a ventilation housing. Lyra lay on her back, staring up at the heavy industrial smog of the lower city. Her ribs throbbed. Her arm was bleeding. Elias groaned, untangling his limbs from hers. He sat up, checking his limbs. That, he wheezed, was not in the brochure. Lyra sat up, brushing wet hair from her face. She looked at him. He was shaking, adrenaline dumping into his system, but he was alive. "You hit a justiciar with a wrench," she said. She sounded horrified and amazed. Elias shrugged, wincing. "It was the only tool I had. High-tech assassins versus percussive maintenance. I think I voided the warranty on his helmet." Lyra started to laugh. It was a hysterical, jagged sound that hurt her chest, but she couldn't stop. They sat there in the rain and the grime, laughing until they gasped. Two fugitives on the floor of the world. "We need a place to hide," Lyra said once they had caught their breath. "A place where my family's eyes do not reach. I assume the Ritz is fully booked," Elias muttered, helping her stand. "There is one person," Lyra said. "He is difficult, but he hates my father more than I do." They traveled deeper into the underside, moving through tunnels that smelled of ozone and fried lizard meat. They arrived at a heavy steel door nestled between a toxic waste reclamation plant and a neon-lit noodle bar. A holographic sign above the door flickered in pink script. "The Gilded Tongue." Lyra knocked, a complex rhythm of 3 sharp raps and a scratch. A slot opened. A reptilian eye peered out. "We are full," a gravelly voice growled. "Tell Jax that his favorite headache is here," Lyra said. The eye blinked. The slot slid shut. A moment later, the heavy bolts clanked back, and the door swung open. Music blasted them, a chaotic, rhythmic thrum of bass and synth pipes. The club was packed with aliens of every description, the air thick with smoke that smelled of cinnamon and illegal euphoria spores. A figure pushed through the crowd, arms wide. He was a tall, slender alien with skin the color of polished teal marble and a mane of feathers that shifted color with his mood. He wore a suit made of crushed velvet and diamond mesh, tailored to be as offensive to traditional sensibilities as possible. "Lyra!" the figure boomed, grabbing her in a hug that smelled of expensive perfume and gin. "You look terrible. Did you fall out of a garbage chute? And who is the pet?" "Jax. This is Elias," Lyra said, extricating herself. "Elias. This is Jax, my cousin, and the black sheep of House Vane." Jax looked Elias up and down, his feathers turning a curious shade of lavender. A human. How scandalous. I love it. Is he housebroken? I can hear you, Elias said dryly. Jax grinned, showing too many teeth. He speaks. Come into the back, before the peacekeepers realize I am harboring fugitives. He led them through the club, past tables where dissidents and artists drank glowing blue wine. On the stage, a four-armed comedian was telling a joke about the High Council's breeding habits that would have earned him a death sentence in the upper city. Jax shoved them into a private booth draped in heavy curtains. He poured 3 glasses of amber liquid. So, Jax said, leaning back. The rumor mill says the palace is in lockdown. They say a terrorist cell attacked the shrine. I assume you are the terrorists? My father is trafficking humans, Lyra said. She didn't sugarcoat it. She told him everything, the crash, the sleep coffins, the memory harvesting, the justiciars. Jax listened, his feathers darkening to a somber indigo. He swirled his drink, the playfulness vanishing from his face. I knew Varric was a monster, Jax said softly. But this is industrial. Why? Elias asked. Why do they need a war so bad? Jax laughed, a bitter sound. Oh, my sweet primitive friend, they do not want a war. War is messy. They want the threat of war. He leaned forward. House Vane owns the security contracts for 12 systems. Every time there is a border skirmish, our stock goes up. Every time a human is caught spying, the council votes for more funding. They are manufacturing a boogeyman to keep the population scared and the treasury full. And the memory harvesting? That is just a bonus, selling compliance to the highest bidder. Elias looked at Lyra. She was staring into her glass, her face pale. So it's all a lie, Elias said. The purity laws, the protection, it's just a sales pitch. Lyra looked up. Her eyes were hard. I need to stop it. Jax. Jax sighed. You can't. Varric has the council in his pocket. He has the army. You have a wrench and a bad haircut. We have the truth, Lyra said. Or we will. I know where the truth engine is. Jax choked on his drink. The Museum of Antiquities? Lyra, that is a fortress, and the engine hasn't been fired in 300 years. It's a myth. It is real, Lyra insisted. And if we can get the core, we can broadcast the convoy footage on a frequency they cannot jam. A sudden roar of laughter from the main room interrupted them. The comedian had finished his set. The crowd was chanting for more. Jax's eyes lit up. He looked at Elias. I need a distraction, Jax said. My headline act just canceled. He was arrested for sedition. No, Elias said, backing away. Absolutely not. Just 5 minutes, Jax said, shoving Elias toward the curtain. Go out there. Be human. Be funny. If you win them over, I will give you the access codes for the museum's service tunnels. I am an engineer, Elias protested as Jax pushed him through the curtain onto the stage. I don't tell jokes. The spotlight hit Elias like a physical blow. The room went silent. 300 aliens stared at him, predators, prey, slime molds, and things with tentacles. Elias stood there, blinking. He looked at the microphone. He looked at Lyra, who was watching from the wings with a look of terrified apology. So, Elias said, his voice cracking, hi, I'm Elias, I'm from Earth. A boo hissed from the back. Right, tough crowd, Elias muttered. He tapped the microphone. You know, my people. We just discovered faster than light travel about 50 years ago. We thought we were hot stuff. We painted flames on the side of our ships. A few chuckles. Then I crash-landed here. Elias continued, gaining a little rhythm. And I see your ships. They are grown from crystal. They sing to the stars. They are beautiful. And then I look at my ship. My ship is held together by 3 bolts and a roll of gray sticky tape we call hope. Laughter rippled through the room. The idea of advanced spaceflight being held together by tape was apparently a universal comedy constant. You guys have anti-gravity, Elias said, miming a floating motion. We have falling with style. You have energy shields. We have duck and cover. Honestly, I'm surprised we haven't accidentally blown up our own moon yet. Oh wait, we almost did that twice. The crowd roared. It wasn't just the jokes, it was the vulnerability. In a city of perfect, arrogant overlords. Here was a creature admitting he was barely keeping it together. Elias finished his set to thunderous applause. He stumbled off stage, sweating, and collapsed onto a crate next to Lyra. That, he panted, was worse than the assassins. You were wonderful, Lyra said, and she meant it. She looked at him with a softness that scared her. Jax appeared, clapping slow and rhythmic. Bravo! The crowd loves a disaster. A deal is a deal. He handed Lyra a data chip, the service tunnels. But Lyra, if you go in there, you won't come out the same. This is treason. I know, Lyra said. Later, in the quiet of the back room, the adrenaline faded, leaving a heavy, suffocating silence. Elias was cleaning the grease off his hands with a rag. He stopped and looked at Lyra. You're a princess, he said. It wasn't a question. I am the High Counselor's daughter, Lyra corrected. It is not the same. It's close enough, Elias said. He sounded tired, defeated. I saw the news feeds in the bar. They're calling for your head. Lyra. They're saying you've been brainwashed. If they catch you, they will execute me, Lyra said simply. Elias stood up. He walked over to her, his presence filling the small space. I can't let you do this, he said. Lyra stiffened. You do not have a choice. I do, Elias said. I can turn myself in. I can tell them I kidnapped you. I can tell them I forced you to help me. They'll let you go. You can go back to being the perfect daughter. You can live. And you? Lyra asked, her voice trembling. I'm just an engineer, Elias said, forcing a smile. I'm nobody. Lyra closed the distance between them in 2 strides. She grabbed the lapels of his jacket, her eyes blazing with a fierce, terrifying anger. Do not dare, she hissed. Do not you dare decide for me like everyone else. My father decides who I marry. My tutors decide what I think. The council decides where I walk. She pulled him closer, until they were breathing the same air. I am choosing this, Elias. I am choosing the danger. I am choosing the treason. Because for the first time in my life, I am awake. Elias looked down at her. His hands came up, cupping her face. His thumbs traced the high, alien cheekbones, the dusting of silver scales at her temples. If I burn, you burn, he whispered. That's a bad deal. Lyra. Lyra leaned her forehead against his. The contact was electric, grounding. It wasn't a kiss, and it was something deeper. It was a transfer of weight. I do not want safe, she whispered against his skin. I want you. I want us, even if it breaks my life into pieces. Elias let out a breath he seemed to have been holding since the crash. He closed his eyes, pressing his forehead harder against hers. Okay. He breathed. Okay. We burn together. They stood there for a long moment, the noise of the club outside fading into a dull thrum. 2 specks of dust deciding to fall in the same direction. The Museum of Antiquities was a mausoleum of dead history. It was a massive, floating structure in the center of the inner ring, guarded by silence and lasers. Getting in through the service tunnels had been easy, thanks to Jax's codes. Getting to the central vault was the problem. The main hall was a cavernous space filled with artifacts from 1,000 conquered worlds. The floor was made of shifting gravity plates, a defense mechanism designed to disorient intruders. "Step where I step," Lyra whispered. She moved across the floor in a strange, syncopated rhythm. Left, pause, slide right. Elias followed, sweating. One wrong step and the floor would invert, slamming them into the ceiling with 20 Gs of force. They made it to the center of the room. There, on a pedestal of obsidian, sat the truth engine. It looked like a heart made of crystal and clockwork, pulsing with a faint white light. It was beautiful and terrifying. Elias reached for his toolkit. "I need to bypass the containment field." "Hurry," Lyra said, scanning the shadows. Elias worked fast, his fingers flying over the holographic interface. "Okay, 3 layers of encryption. Old code, elegant, but static. I can trick it into thinking I'm a maintenance subroutine." He tapped a final command. The field hummed and vanished. "Got it," he whispered. He reached out and grasped the core. The moment his fingers touched the crystal, the museum woke up. It wasn't a siren. It was a feeling. A sudden, oppressive weight in the air. The statues lining the walls, huge stone guardians with gemstone eyes, turned their heads. Living statues. Lyra cursed, "Run!" They grabbed the core and sprinted. The floor began to shift violently, rippling like water. Elias stumbled, sliding toward a gravity well that had opened up near a display of ancient spears. Lyra grabbed his collar and yanked him back, neutralizing the gravity with a pulse from her sash. The statues stepped off their pedestals. They moved with the grinding sound of stone on stone, heavy and unstoppable. "This way!" Lyra shouted, pointing to a ventilation shaft high on the wall. Elias threw a grappling hook, one he had scavenged from the club, and it caught the grate. The winch whined, hauling them up just as a stone fist smashed into the wall where they had been standing. They tumbled into the vent, gasping, clutching the glowing core between them. "Did we get it?" Elias panted. Lyra looked at the core. It was pulsing faster now, reacting to their heartbeats. "We got it. But the silent alarm. It is tied to the royal network. My father knows," she said. They emerged from the vents into the biomechanical forest, a sprawling parkland that surrounded the museum. But this was no ordinary park. The trees were synthetic, their leaves made of sensor mesh that recorded every vibration, every footstep. "We have to be light," Lyra whispered. "The leaves are listening." They moved through the trees, stepping on roots and stones. The forest was beautiful in a nightmare way. The trees glowed with bioluminescence, shifting from green to red as they passed. Elias stepped on a twig. It snapped. Immediately, the trees around them turned a violent crimson. A low hum began to build in the air. "Sorry," Elias whispered, freezing. Lyra grabbed his hand. "It is okay. Keep moving. I'm terrified," Elias admitted, his voice barely audible. "I'm shaking." "Lyra, look at my hands." Lyra looked. His hands were trembling. She stopped, turning to him in the middle of the glowing, hostile forest. She squeezed his fingers. "Do you know what the first rule of diplomatic negotiation is?" Elias shook his head. "No. Never let them see you sweat," Lyra said. "And if you do sweat, tell them it is a cultural greeting." Elias blinked, then snorted. "A cultural greeting?" "Yes," Lyra said, a small smile playing on her lips. "In the rift systems, sweating is a sign of intense respect. You are just being very polite to the trees." Elias chuckled, the tension breaking just enough for him to breathe. "You're ridiculous." "I am royalty," she corrected. "I am eccentric. Now come." They reached the edge of the forest. The city was spread out before them, but something was wrong. The holographic billboards that usually displayed advertisements were all showing the same image. The crest of House Vane, draped in black. A voice boomed across the entire city, echoing from every speaker, "Citizens of Valerian. Due to the unprecedented terrorist threat, the High Council has invoked the Emergency Preservation Act. Martial law is in effect. All borders are sealed." Lyra stared at the sky. He did it. He used the theft to justify a total takeover. Then, the image changed. It showed a room, a chair, and in the chair, beaten and bruised, sat Jax. Lyra gasped. A new voice spoke. It was her father's voice. Calm, reasonable, terrifying. "Lyra, I know you are watching. You have been misled by a foreign contaminant. Return to the palace. Surrender the human, and your cousin will be spared. Refuse, and he will be executed at dawn for treason." The feed cut to black. Elias looked at Lyra. Her face had gone ashen. She looked small, standing there in the dark, clutching the truth engine to her chest like a child clutching a doll. "He has Jax," she whispered. Elias put a hand on her shoulder. He felt the tremors running through her body. "We have the truth engine," Elias said. "We can expose him." Lyra looked at him. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to shed. "But if we do, Jax dies." She looked at the palace, glowing like a poisoned jewel on the horizon. "My father does not make deals. Elias, he makes traps." She turned to him, her expression hardening into something brittle and sharp. "He wants a surrender?" she said softly. "Fine. I will give him one." The grand promenade leading to the Palace of the Sun was a mile of polished obsidian that reflected the sky like a dark mirror. Lyra walked it alone. She wore the ceremonial white robes of penitence, a heavy, stiff garment embroidered with silver thread that scraped softly against the stone with every step. Her head was bowed, her hands clasped reverently around a sphere of hollowed crystal, the orb of ancestors, a traditional offering meant to symbolize the transparency of the soul. Inside the sphere, however, the soul was not transparent. Hidden within the refractive facets of the crystal sat the condensed core of the truth engine, humming with a frequency that made Lyra's fingers numb. She did not look up as she approached the main gates. She could feel the eyes of the royal guard on her, heavy and suspicious behind their visors. She could feel the drones buzzing overhead, scanning her biorhythm for spikes of adrenaline. She forced her heart to beat with the slow, rhythmic pulse of surrender. "Lady Lyra," the captain of the guard said, stepping forward. His voice was amplified, booming across the plaza. "You are cleared for entry. The High Counselor is expecting you." Lyra stopped. She raised her head slowly, letting the sunlight catch the silver scales at her temples. She looked the captain in the eye, channeling every ounce of aristocratic arrogance she had been bred to possess. "Does he expect a daughter, captain, or a prisoner?" The captain hesitated, his gloved hand twitching near his weapon. "That is for the council to decide, my lady." Lyra nodded once, cold and imperious, and swept past him. The massive blast doors hissed open, swallowing her into the cool, recycled air of the palace. She was inside. The trap was sprung, but the bait had teeth. While Lyra played the role of the prodigal daughter in the upper halls, Elias Thorne was learning the geography of the invisible. He was 300 feet below the marble floors, in the sweltering, noisy labyrinth of the service wing. Here, the air smelled of industrial lubricant and synthesized protein paste. The walls were not gilded, they were stripped metal, scarred by centuries of repair. Elias wiped grease across his forehead, adjusting the heavy collar of his mechanic's jumpsuit. He had been smuggled in by a contact of Jax's, a sanitation supervisor named Kyle, who had lost 3 brothers to the memory drafts. "Keep your head down," Kale muttered, shoving a hover cart full of laundry into Elias's hands. "You are Unit 704. You do not speak. You do not look the guards in the eye. You fix the pipes and you move on." "I can do pipes," Elias whispered, gripping the handle of the cart. Kale glared at him. "No talking. The walls have ears here too. Human. But down here, the walls are angry." Elias nodded and pushed the cart into the corridor. He felt exposed, despite the disguise. His height, his gait, the very way he held his shoulders screamed outsider. He forced himself to hunch, to adopt the shuffling, beaten walk of the workers around him. He passed a group of cleaning drones being serviced by a 4-armed technician. The technician glanced at him, saw the fear in Elias's eyes, and looked away. It wasn't rejection, it was solidarity. Everyone down here had secrets. Elias checked the localized map Lyra had uploaded to his contact lens before they separated. He needed to get to the atmospheric scrubbers in the north wing. That was the junction point. That was where the vents from the secured labs fed into the main system. He moved through the tunnels, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a spy. He was an engineer who usually worried about fuel efficiency and thermal coupling. Now, he was carrying a bag of tools that were modified to dismantle a planetary government. He thought of Lyra, walking into the lion's den with nothing but a glass ball and a lie. "Don't die on me, princess," he thought, turning the cart sharply toward the service elevator. "Because if you do, I'm going to have to take this whole place apart bolt by bolt." Lyra deposited the orb of ancestors in the offering niche of her private chambers, checking 3 times that the concealment field was active. Then, she changed. She shed the white robes of the penitent and dressed in the midnight blue flight suit of a royal inspector. It was a role she had played a dozen times for ceremonial reviews, the dutiful daughter checking the efficiency of the household. She accessed the hidden service shaft behind her wardrobe, the one she used to use as a child to steal sweets from the kitchens. She slid down the ladder, moving from the light into the dark. She met Elias in the shadow of a massive ventilation fan that thrummed like a sleeping beast. He looked ridiculous in the oversized jumpsuit, grease smearing his cheek. But to Lyra, he looked like oxygen. "You are late," she whispered, grabbing his arm to pull him out of the sight line of a passing maintenance drone. "I got stuck behind a garbage compactor," Elias whispered back, his eyes scanning her face frantically. "Are you okay? Did he hurt you?" "I am fine," Lyra said. Though her hands were trembling, Zavarek accepted the surrender. "He thinks he has won. He thinks I am broken." Elias's jaw tightened. "We're going to make him regret that." They moved together, moving deeper into the restricted sector. This was the area Lyra had never been allowed to visit, the sub-basement beneath the medical wing. The map on Elias's lens guided them to a heavy, unmarked door. Lyra used the living sigil still embedded in her arm. She pressed her elbow against the panel. The flesh burned, the biotech beetle writhing under her skin as it interfaced with the lock. The light turned green. The door slid open. The smell hit them first. It wasn't the metallic tang of blood. It was the sterile chemical scent of ozone and antiseptic, overlaying something sharper, the smell of terror. They stepped onto a catwalk overlooking a cavernous laboratory. Lyra stopped, her breath caught in her throat. Below them, rows of sleek silver pods lined the walls. They looked like sleep coffins, but they were active. Inside each one, a figure writhed in slow motion, suspended in a thick, amber gel. Cables were attached to their skulls, glowing with a pulsing violet light. Lyra gripped the railing, her knuckles turning white. She recognized the woman in the nearest pod. It was a baker from the merchant district, a woman who had spoken out against the tax hikes last season. "She's screaming," Lyra whispered. Elias looked at the monitor next to the pod. The readout was scrolling rapid streams of data. Memory sector 4, erasing, emotional attachment, severing, loyalty implant, uploading. "They aren't just erasing them," Elias said, his voice sick with horror. "They're rewriting them. They're taking their trauma, their anger, their love, and they're replacing it with obedience. They're manufacturing ghosts." Lyra saw a human in the next row, a man with gray hair, his mouth open in a silent howl behind the glass. "My father called this stability," she hissed. She reached for her sash, her fingers closing around the hilt of her light blade. "I am going to kill them. I am going to go down there and I am going to kill every scientist in this room." She took a step toward the ladder, blind with rage. It was a red tide, washing away her logic, washing away the plan. These were her people, and the humans were Elias's people. They were being hollowed out like fruit. "Lyra, no!" Elias grabbed her. He wrapped his arms around her waist, hauling her back from the edge. "Let me go," she snarled, fighting him. She was stronger than him, her alien physiology dense and powerful, but he held on with desperate strength. "If you go down there, the alarms trigger," Elias whispered harshly into her ear. "You kill 5 scientists, and the guards kill you. And then this place keeps running forever." "I do not care," Lyra sobbed, the fight draining out of her as quickly as it had come, replaced by a crushing grief. "Look at them. Elias, I see them," Elias said, turning her around so she had to look at him. "I see them, Lyra, but if you burn now, they win. They win forever. You have to wait. You have to be cold." Lyra looked at him. His hazel eyes were wet, filled with the same horror she felt. But he was holding it back. He was being the anchor she needed. The restraint hurt. It felt like swallowing glass. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tear the palace down brick by bloody brick. She took a shuddering breath, nodding against his chest. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, we stick to the plan." A door hissed open on the level below. 2 scientists walked in, holding data pads. Elias pulled her back into the shadows of the maintenance shaft. The space was tiny, a narrow vertical crawl space filled with pipes. They were pressed together, chest to chest, hidden in the dark. They froze, listening to the scientists discuss the yield of the latest batch. Lyra was shaking. Elias held her, his hands flat against her back, grounding her. The danger was a physical weight, pressing in on them from all sides. But in the dark, the fear began to transmute. Lyra looked up at him. Their faces were inches apart. She could feel his heart beating against her own, a frantic, syncopated rhythm. The adrenaline of the near discovery, the horror of the lab, the sheer madness of what they were doing, it all funneled into a sudden, sharp need. She gripped the front of his jumpsuit. "If we die tonight," she whispered, her voice fierce and low, "I want to know what it feels like to not be afraid." Elias looked at her, his gaze dropping to her mouth, then back to her eyes. He didn't offer comfort. He offered fire. "We're not going to die," he whispered. "But God." "Lyra, I want to cross every line you have." He ran a hand up her neck, his thumb grazing the sensitive skin behind her ear. Lyra gasped, the sound loud in the small space. She pressed closer, burying her hands in his hair, pulling him down. They didn't kiss. It was too dangerous, too loud. Instead, they pressed their foreheads together, breathing each other's air. sharing a desperate, silent intimacy that was more carnal than any touch. It was a vow. It was a terrifying admission that they belonged to each other in a way that defied species, law, and logic. "You are my gravity," Lyra whispered. "And you're my oxygen," Elias replied. The scientists left the room. The door hissed shut. Lyra pulled back, her eyes shining in the gloom. "Let's go break something," she said. Lyra left Elias to begin the sabotage on the ventilation systems and made her way to the detention block. She had clearance to visit the state prisoners. It was a privilege of her rank, usually reserved for gloating or interrogation. She found Jax in cell 4. It wasn't a dungeon. It was a white room with no corners, lit by a blinding, shadowless light designed to destroy circadian rhythms. Jax was sitting on the floor, his beautiful teal feathers dull and ruffled. His velvet suit was torn. His face was bruised purple along the jawline. The force field shivered as Lyra approached. Jax looked up. He squinted against the glare, and then a crooked, split-lipped grin spread across his face. "Well, look who it is," Jax rasped. "The prodigal daughter. Did you bring me a file? Or a cake with a bomb in it?" "I brought you a promise," Lyra said, her voice steady. Jax laughed, then winced, clutching his ribs. "You look terrible, cousin. You have that look in your eyes. The one Varek hates. You look like you have an opinion." Lyra deactivated the audio sensors for 10 seconds, a temporary loop she could blame on a glitch. "Tonight," she whispered quickly. "When the fireworks start, the locks will disengage. Do not run for the exit. Run for the service hangar. Kale is waiting with a transport." Jax's eyes widened. He scrambled up to the glass. "You are actually doing it," he said. "You are taking on the house." Lyra placed her hand against the field. "You finally rebel," Jax said, his voice soft with affection and worry. "And you do it for a human with a wrench and a bad sense of humor. You finally rebel for someone cute." "He is not cute," Lyra said, a faint smile touching her lips. "He is necessary." Jax nodded. "Get out of here, Lyra, before Varek smells the hope on you." The final stop was the hardest. Lyra walked into the High Council's private viewing chamber. Varek was standing by the window, looking out at the city. The sun was setting, painting the violet clouds with streaks of blood orange. "Father," Lyra said. Varek turned. He looked regal, untouchable. He looked like the hero of every history book Lyra had ever read. "You seem troubled, Lyra," he said smoothly. "Is the guilt of your deception weighing on you?" "I have a question," Lyra said. She walked to the center of the room. She did not bow. "Ask, are the rumors true?" she asked. "Are we taking humans?" Varek sighed, the sound of a patient teacher dealing with a slow child. He walked over to a side table and poured a glass of wine. "We are not taking humans, Lyra. We are securing resources. They are people," Lyra said. "They are chaos," Varek corrected, his voice hardening. "Look at their history. They burn their own worlds. They consume. They are a virus, Lyra. We are the immune system." He turned to her, swirling the wine. "Sacrifices maintain stability," he said. "If we must process a few thousand primitives to ensure the peace of the inner ring, that is a mathematical necessity. It is not cruelty. It is gardening." "And what if I loved one?" Lyra asked. The glass in Varek's hand shattered. He didn't throw it. He gripped it so hard it exploded. Wine and blood dripped onto the pristine white carpet. Varek looked at her, and for the first time, Lyra saw the monster behind the mask. It wasn't greed. It was disgust, pure ideological revulsion. "Then you would be a cancer," Varek whispered, And I would cut you out myself. Lyra stared at him. The last thread of doubt, the last childish hope that her father was merely misguided, snapped. I understand, she said quietly. She turned to leave. Lyra, Varric called out. She stopped. Do not be late for the ceremony. The universe is watching. I wouldn't miss it for the world, Lyra said. Down in the guts of the palace, Elias had found the master control for the ceremony's special effects. He was looking at the schematics for the staged attack. It was clever. At the height of the anthem, a swarm of drones painted with human resistance colors would descend from the clouds. They were programmed to fire low-yield explosives into the crowd, enough to wound, to cause panic, but not to kill the high-ranking officials. Then, the palace defense grid would heroically intercept them, vaporizing the drones and proving the need for Varric's new war powers. Elias worked with sweat stinging his eyes. He had spliced into the drone control feed using the codes Lyra had stolen. Okay, he muttered to himself. You want a show? I'll give you a show, he typed furiously, rewriting the targeting parameters. Targeting, hostile crowd, delete, targeting, open sky, confirm, payload, high explosive, swap, payload, magnesium flares, data packets, confirm. He wasn't just disarming them, he was turning them into delivery systems. When those drones detonated, they wouldn't drop bombs. They would drop the truth. Every screen, every data pad, every retinal implant within 10 miles would receive the footage from the convoy and the lab. He finished the code and hit execute. A heavy hand clamped onto his shoulder. Elias froze. He turned slowly. A maintenance worker, a massive rock-skinned alien, was standing there. The alien looked at the screen. He saw the code. He saw the footage of the prisoners queued up for broadcast. He looked at Elias. For the rebellion? The alien grunted. Elias swallowed hard. For the truth. The alien nodded slowly. Then he stepped back and pointed down the hall. Patrol coming? Go left. Elias slumped with relief. Thank you. He ran. They met at the rendezvous point, the service entrance to the inner ring gate. This was the final hurdle. They had to get to the transmitter array on the gate itself to boost the signal from the drones, ensuring it punched through the government jamming. Lyra was waiting in the shadows. She looked pale, her jaw set like stone. Did you do it? She asked. The drones are primed, Elias said. When the music starts, it's going to rain data. Good, Lyra said. Now we just need to get past the gate. They stepped out of the shadows. The gate was guarded by a squad of elite shock troopers. They kept their heads down, walking briskly. Lyra had her inspector's uniform. Elias had his worker's jumpsuit. They just needed to look like they belonged. Stop! A voice barked. A guard stepped into their path. He was huge, his armor gleaming under the floodlights. He held a disruptor rifle leveled at Elias's chest. Scan identifies biological mismatch, the guard said, his voice amplified. Remove your helmet. Worker. Elias froze. He looked at Lyra. Remove it, the guard commanded. Elias reached up slowly and pulled off the welding goggles and hood. The guard stared at him. A human. The recognition was instant. The guard's eyes went wide behind his visor. He raised the rifle, his finger tightening on the trigger. Humans aren't allowed here, the guard shouted. The exact words from the sign, the exact words of the law. Elias braced himself. He had the wrench in his belt, but against a disruptor rifle, it was a joke. Lyra moved. She didn't attack. She didn't draw her light blade. She stepped directly in front of the gun. She placed her chest against the barrel of the disruptor rifle. Then arrest me too, she said. Her voice was not a scream. It was a command. It shook with adrenaline. but it carried the weight of 1,000 years of ruling history. The guard froze. He looked at the woman standing before him. The silver scales, the violet eyes, the signet ring. "Lady Lyra?" the guard stammered. "I am aiding this human," Lyra said, her voice ringing out across the plaza. "If you shoot him, you shoot the heir of House Vane. Do it. Pull the trigger." The guard's hand shook. He couldn't do it. The conditioning to obey the bloodline was deeper than the conditioning to hate humans. He lowered the weapon, confused, terrified. "My lady, I cannot." "Let us pass," Lyra ordered. The guard stepped back, lowering the rifle completely. Lyra grabbed Elias's hand. "Go!" They sprinted past the checkpoint, toward the transmitter controls. "We did it," Elias panted. "We actually..." A siren split the air. It wasn't the alarm of a breach. It was the deep, resonant horn of a royal decree. Lyra stopped. She looked up at the massive holographic screens that lined the plaza. The face of her father appeared. He was not angry. He looked sad. "Citizens of Valerian," Varric spoke, his voice heavy with grief. "It is with a broken heart that I must announce a tragedy. My daughter, Lyra, has been infected." Lyra stared at the screen. "The human terrorists have used a neural parasite to compromise her mind." Varric continued. "She is no longer herself. She is being used as a puppet to destabilize our safety." The narrative shifted in real time. The crowd in the plaza turned. They didn't see a rebel princess. They saw a victim, a sick girl, a puppet. "I have ordered a complete lockdown of the palace district," Varric said. "For her own safety and yours, securing all exits." Huge blast shields slammed down over the gates. The sky bridges retracted. The transmitter array they were running toward powered down, locked out by a master override. Lyra watched the exit seal. "He didn't trap us in," Elias realized, looking at the closing walls. "No," Lyra whispered, watching the crimson lights of the combat drones activate on the perimeter walls. "He trapped us in the kill box." The announcement continued. "Apprehend the human at all costs. Secure Lady Lyra for treatment. The infection must be purged." The guard who had let them pass raised his rifle again. This time, there was no hesitation. He wasn't shooting a royal. He was shooting a parasite. "Run!" Lyra screamed. They turned and ran back into the maze of the palace gardens as the air around them filled with the sizzling snap of plasma fire. The grand amphitheater of Valerian was not merely a building. It was a geography of power. Carved from the living silica of the crater wall, it seated 200,000 citizens in concentric rings of polished white stone. Above them, the night sky had been erased. In its place, massive holographic projectors painted a ceiling of gold and violet light, depicting the myth of the first arrival. The moment the Vane ancestors descended from the stars to tame the chaotic wilds of the planet. It was a festival of lies. Lyra stood in the shadow of a support pillar near the southern service entrance, breathless and trembling. Beside her, Elias was wiping soot from his face, his eyes darting across the sea of cheering faces. The noise was a physical weight, a roar of devotion that vibrated in the marrow of their bones. "They are cheering for their own cage," Elias shouted over the din. "They do not know it is a cage," Lyra replied, her voice tight. "That is why it works. They were surrounded by the enemy, yet invisible in the chaos." The lockdown had created a paradox. With the exit sealed and the ceremony beginning, the security forces were pushed to the perimeter, leaving the internal crush of the crowd unmanaged. Lyra and Elias moved like currents in a river, slipping between dignitaries in shimmering robes and workers in gray tunics who had been allowed in to witness the spectacle. "We need to reach the projection node," Lyra said, pointing toward the central spire that rose from the arena floor like a jagged needle. That is where the truth engine can interface with the global feed. It is right in the middle of the stage, Elias noted, checking the diagnostic on his wrist link. We are going to have to walk through the main performance. Then we walk, Lyra said. A hush fell over the amphitheater, sudden and absolute, as if the air itself had been commanded to still. In the center of the arena, a platform rose. High Counselor Varric stood alone, bathed in a spotlight of pure white. He looked small against the scale of the architecture, yet his presence filled the crater. Citizens of Valerian. Varric began. His voice was not amplified by speakers, but projected directly into the inner ear implants of every person in the city. It was intimate, a whisper in the mind of millions. Tonight, we celebrate the wall that keeps the darkness out. Lyra froze. She knew that cadence. She knew that specific inflection of warmth wrapping around a core of steel. It was the same voice that had read her bedtime stories. The same voice that had explained why she could not play with the gardener's children. We live in a garden, Varric continued, pacing slowly across the platform. And a garden requires a gardener. We pull the weeds not because we hate them, but because we love the flower. The human threat that gathers at our borders is not a nation. It is a blight. It is entropy. Lyra felt a sick jolt of recognition. Entropy. It was the word he had used when she was 6 years old, crying over a bird with a broken wing that he had ordered a drone to incinerate. It is entropy. Lyra. It must be removed to preserve the order. He is weaponizing my childhood, she whispered, horror cold in her stomach. He is taking the lessons he taught me and using them to justify genocide. He is good at it, Elias muttered, his jaw clenched. I almost want to believe him. And I am the weed he is talking about. They pushed forward, shoving through a cluster of priests who were too entranced by the speech to notice two disheveled figures. They reached the maintenance hatch that led beneath the stage. Elias popped the lock with his sonic wrench, and they slipped into the darkness of the understructure. Above them, the speech reached its crescendo. They call us cruel, Varric roared, and the crowd roared back. They call us tyrants because we refuse to let our culture be diluted. But I tell you, true compassion is the strength to protect what is pure. Elias was sprinting now, navigating the catwalks beneath the stage floor. We have 3 minutes before the drones arrive, he panted. They reached the base of the projection node. It was a massive column of fiber optics and crystal, pulsing with the data of the broadcast. Lyra pulled the truth engine core from her sash. The device was humming violently, sensing the proximity of the network. Connect it, Lyra ordered. Elias jammed the core into the primary data port. The node shuddered. Sparks showered down on them. It needs a biometric key, Elias yelled over the thrum of the machine. It needs a witness. Lyra, the engine cannot just broadcast data. It verifies truth through memory. It needs a living mind to authenticate the footage. Lyra stepped forward. She placed her hands on the interface panels. The crystal felt warm, almost alive. I will do it, she said. Lyra, Elias warned, grabbing her wrist. This isn't just uploading a file. If you interface with this, it is going to pull everything, not just what you saw in the lab. It is going to show them your fear, your silence. He looked at her with desperate intensity. They will see that you stood by him for years. They will see your shame. I know, Lyra said. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were dry. That is why it has to be me. They need to see that I was part of it. They need to see that the monster is not just him. It is the silence of good people. She looked at the interface. To use the truth engine was to strip oneself naked before the galaxy. It was the ultimate vulnerability. Elias did not let go of her wrist. "You are not doing this alone," he said. He slammed his other hand onto the adjacent panel. "Elias?" "I was there too," he said, his hazel eyes locking onto hers. "I recorded the convoy. I saw the labs. If you are going to bleed for them, I am bleeding with you." The machine began to whine, a high-pitched frequency that vibrated in their teeth. The connection was forming. Their minds were being bridged, their memories synchronized to the broadcast frequency. The intimacy of the moment was terrifying. In the physical world, they were standing 2 feet apart in a dirty utility crawl space. In the psychic space of the engine, they were tangled together, their fears and desires colliding like weather fronts. Lyra felt Elias's terror, not for himself, but for her. She felt the depth of his awe when he first saw her in the crash site. She felt his anger at the injustice, burning like a clean white flame. And he felt her. He felt the crushing weight of her title. He felt the loneliness that had been her constant companion until she found him. He felt the desire she had buried under layers of duty, the desperate, selfish want to be loved not for her bloodline, but for her soul. The air around them crackled with static. They were breathless, their foreheads almost touching, caught in the eye of the storm. "I do not want this to be a rebellion," Lyra whispered, her voice breaking. "That is too small. I want you. I want this to be the truth." Elias leaned in, his breath hot against her skin. "Then let the universe watch," he whispered. They slammed their palms flat against the crystal. "Activate." Above them, the staged attack began. Varek raised his hands to the sky. And now, behold the treachery of the enemy. On cue, the swarm of drones descended from the clouds. They were painted in the crude, jagged colors of the human resistance. They shrieked as they dove toward the crowded stands, but Elias had done his work. The drones did not fire missiles. They did not drop bombs. Instead, their weapon bays opened, and they fired magnesium flares, thousands of them. Brilliant, harmless stars of blinding white light that drifted down like snow. The crowd gasped, flinching, waiting for the fire. But there was only light. Then, the truth engine took the sky, the holographic ceiling, which had been displaying the heroic ancestors, fractured. The gold and violet myth shattered like glass. In its place, a new image formed, a raw, jagged feed projected 10 miles wide. It was the view from a hidden niche in the underside. The crowd saw the convoy. They saw the sleep coffins. They saw the faces of the prisoners, human and alien alike. A collective murmur of confusion rippled through the amphitheater. Then the image shifted. It was the view from Elias's eyes in the lab. The rows of pods, the baker from the merchant district, screaming silently in the gel. The data scrolling on the monitors, memory erase, loyalty upload, and then the feed shifted to Lyra's memory. The massive face of Varek appeared in the sky, not as the benevolent leader, but as he had been in the private chamber an hour ago. The audio was crystal clear, stripped of all distortion by the engine's verification algorithms. They are a virus. Lyra, we are the immune system. Sacrifices maintain stability. And then, the most damning image of all, the royal crest of House Vane stamped on the side of a prisoner transport. The silence in the amphitheater broke. It didn't break with a cheer. It broke with a scream of horror that started in the merchant sections and spiraled outward. Varek stood on the platform, staring up at his own face, magnified 1,000 times in the sky. For the first time in his life, he looked small. "Lies!" Varek shouted, his voice amplified by the panic in the control room. This is a fabrication, a human trick. The truth engine responded. It was designed to counter denial. A glowing seal of verification appeared over the footage, a complex mathematical proof that the memory was organic, unaltered, and true. It was the seal of the ancients, a symbol that no technology could forge. The crowd saw the seal. They knew what it meant. A bottle was thrown from the upper stands. It smashed onto the stage near Varek's feet. Then another. Then a roar of fury that shook the foundations of the crater. "Security!" Varek screamed. "Seize them! Cut the feed!" The royal guard on the perimeter hesitated. They looked at the sky. They looked at the prisoners in the footage. They saw their own neighbors, their own cousins who had disappeared. One guard lowered his rifle, then two, then a whole phalanx, down in the detention block. The chaos had already arrived. Jax was waiting. As the power fluctuated from the truth engine's massive draw, the force fields on the cells flickered and died. Jax kicked the door open. He didn't run for the exit. He ran for the guard station. The guard on duty was staring at his monitor, paralyzed by the broadcast. Jax picked up a heavy stun baton and tapped the guard on the shoulder. "Excuse me," Jax said politely. The guard turned. Jax punched him, a surprisingly solid right hook that sent the guard crumbling to the floor. Jax stepped over him and grabbed a ceremonial cape from the wall rack, a velvet thing meant for high-ranking wardens. He threw it over his torn suit, struck a dramatic pose, and bowed to the empty corridor. "The show must go on," he announced to no one, and sprinted for the service hangar. In the control room beneath the stage, Lyra and Elias collapsed back from the interface, gasping for air. The connection was broken, but the feed was self-sustaining now. "We did it," Elias wheezed, sliding down to the floor. Lyra looked at him, her eyes wide. "We are not done. Look." She pointed to the diagnostic screen. The energy readings from the palace were spiking, not the broadcast energy. Something else, something deeper in the planetary core. Varek was not a man who accepted defeat. If he could not rule the garden, he would salt the earth. "He is activating the sanctuary shield," Lyra said, her voice turning into ice. "What is that?" "It is a planetary isolation field," Lyra explained, scrambling to her feet. "It was designed for an extinction-level event. If it activates, it seals the atmosphere in a hard light shell. Nothing goes in, nothing comes out. And then, it purges, and purges what? Everything that is not coded to the royal bloodline," Lyra said. "It will incinerate the humans. It will incinerate the dissidents. It will turn this crater into a tomb." She looked at Elias. "You have to stop the mechanism. The control spire is at the top of the amphitheater. You have to manually disengage the coupling." "Me?" Elias asked. "What about you?" "I am going to the private chambers," Lyra said. "He will be there. He will be trying to escape to the bunker while the city burns. I have to stop him." Elias grabbed her shoulders. "Lyra, he will kill you." "No," Lyra said. "He won't, because he still thinks he owns me." She kissed him. It was fierce, desperate, almost tasted of ash and ozone. "Go!" she screamed. Elias ran. He sprinted up the service stairs, his lungs burning. The amphitheater was a war zone. The crowd was rioting, tearing up seats, fighting with the loyalist remnants of the guard. Above him, the sky was beginning to curdle. The violet clouds were hardening into a translucent, shimmering shell. The air was getting hot. He reached the base of the control spire. It was locked. A heavy blast door barred the way. Elias cursed. He didn't have the sigil. He didn't have a key. He looked at the control panel. It was alien tech, unrecognizable crystals and light paths. "Okay," he muttered, pulling out his multi-tool. Alien tech, same physics. Logic is logic. He ripped the panel off. Beneath the elegant crystals, There were copper grounds and fiber bundles. He laughed. It was just fancy wiring. He started crossing circuits, using his own saliva to conduct the charge on a fried connector. "Come on, you piece of junk," he grunted. The door hissed open. He scrambled inside and began to climb the ladder to the apex. The heat was rising. The purge sequence was counting down. Lyra kicked open the doors to the High Counselor's private sanctuary. Varric was there. He was packing a case with data crystals. He looked up as she entered, his face a mask of cold, terrifying calm. "You have ruined everything," he said. Lyra walked into the room. The walls were lined with portraits of their ancestors, stern, golden-eyed men and women who had built an empire on a foundation of bones. "I have saved us," Lyra said. "I have saved us from the lie." Varric snapped the case shut. "You are a child. You do not understand the burden of survival. The universe is a dark forest. Lyra, there are wolves in the trees. I built a wall to keep them out." "You built a slaughterhouse," Lyra shouted. "You are not protecting us from wolves." "Father, you are the wolf." Varric drew a weapon. It was an antique kinetic pistol, elegant and deadly. He pointed it at her heart. "I gave you life," Varric said softly. "I molded you. I raised you above the muck. You owe me your obedience." Lyra looked at the gun. She didn't flinch. She took a step forward. "That is your mistake," she said. She thought of Elias, sweating and cursing in the dark to save people he didn't know. She thought of Jax, bleeding in a cell but still cracking jokes. She thought of the way Elias's hand felt in hers, not a shackle, but an anchor. "You think love is a transaction," Lyra said. "You think because you made me, you own me. But love is not obedience, Father. Love is the courage to tell you that you are wrong." Varric's hand trembled. The logic of his world was collapsing. A daughter did not defy a father. A creation did not judge its creator. "Get out of my way." "Lyra," he warned. Lyra activated the gravity pulse in her sash. She didn't use it to attack. She used it to pull. She yanked the portrait of the first ancestor off the wall behind him. The heavy stone frame crashed down, smashing into Varric's shoulder. He cried out, the gun firing wild into the ceiling, and fell to his knees. Lyra was on him in a second. She kicked the gun away. She didn't strike him. She just stood over him, breathing hard, looking down at the man who had been her god for 20 years. He looked small. He looked broken. "It is over," she said. At the top of the spire, Elias was screaming. The alien interface was fighting him. The purge sequence was locked in a logic loop he couldn't break with code. The sky was turning a dark, angry red. "The safeguards are too strong," he yelled at the empty room. He looked at the central crystal. It was the power coupling. "If you can't hack it, break it." He raised his heavy iron wrench. "This is going to void the warranty," he muttered. He swung. The wrench slammed into the crystal. It didn't shatter. He swung again and again. The impact jarred his bones. The crystal began to fracture. Energy arced out, burning his hands, singing his eyebrows. "One more," he screamed. He put his entire body weight into the final swing. The crystal shattered. A shockwave of pure energy blasted him backward against the wall. Outside, the angry red shell in the sky flickered. It groaned, a sound like tectonic plates shifting, and then dissolved into mist. The purge was stopped. The sun rose over a city that was forever changed. Smoke drifted from the palace grounds, but it was the smoke of small fires, not a funeral pyre. The truth engine was still broadcasting, looping the evidence for the galaxy to see. Lyra walked out of the palace gates. She was limping. Her inspector's uniform was scorched. Elias was waiting for her by the fountain. He was nursing a burned hand, his face smeared with soot. but he was grinning. "We are alive," he said, as if he couldn't quite believe it. Lyra walked up to him and buried her face in his chest. He smelled of smoke and sweat and ozone. He smelled like home. "Varek?" Elias asked softly. "In custody," Lyra said into his flight suit. The security forces turned on him. "He is in the same cell he built for Jax." Jax appeared from behind a statue, wearing the stolen velvet cape and holding a bottle of wine he had liberated from the royal cellar. "I give it a week before he starts criticizing the decor," Jax noted, popping the cork. Lyra pulled back from Elias, looking at the city. The people were not cheering anymore, they were talking. Groups of aliens and humans were standing together, arguing, crying, planning. The barrier was gone. She looked at her wrist link. It was beeping with incoming data. Lyra frowned. She tapped the screen, scrolling through the files she had pulled from Varek's private server. "What is it?" Elias asked. Lyra went pale. "The truth engine did its job," she said slowly. "It verified the conspiracy." But Elias, the data didn't just come from Valerian. She projected a hologram from her wrist. It showed a map of the sector. Lines of credit and resource transfers connected House Vane to 6 other major governments. The Galactic Concordat, the Trade Federation, even the Earth Provisional Council. "My father was not working alone," Lyra whispered. "The exclusionary laws, the manufactured wars, it is a network. They are all doing it. They are all keeping their populations afraid to maintain control." Elias looked at the map. The scope of it was staggering. They hadn't just toppled a dictator. They had kicked a hornet's nest that spanned the galaxy. "So," Elias said, his voice grim but steady, "we didn't finish the war. We just fired the opening shot." Lyra looked at him. She looked at the battered ship that Elias had crashed, now being towed out of the rubble by a team of friendly mechanics. She took his hand. Her grip was iron. "Then we have work to do," she said. Elias smiled. The reckless, brilliant smile of an engineer who had just figured out how to fix the universe. "I'll get the duct tape," he said. The victory at the palace was a match struck in a dark room. It provided sudden, blinding illumination, but it did not burn down the house. Not yet. The city of Valerian was in chaos. The truth had fractured the population into 1,000 sharp shards. In the streets, rioters clashed with confused security drones. The truth engine continued to loop the footage of the sleep coffins and the memory labs, painting the sky with the indisputable evidence of House Vane's crimes. But the signal was local. The planetary blockade, enforced by the loyalist Fifth Fleet, was tightening like a noose around the upper atmosphere, jamming all off-world transmissions. "They are trying to quarantine the truth," Lyra said. She was running, splashing through ankle-deep water in the storm tunnels beneath the capital. The air here was heavy with the smell of wet stone and ancient, stagnant moss. Behind her, Elias Thorne splashed through the muck, carrying a heavy satchel of recovered drive cores. Beside him, Jack struggled to keep his balance, holding the hem of his stolen velvet cape out of the filth. "If they black out the system before we reach the transmitter," Jax panted, his voice echoing off the curved walls, "then this whole revolution becomes nothing more than a local riot. The Concordat and the Trade Federation will just glass the planet to hide their involvement." "They will not glass us," Lyra said, though she did not sound entirely certain. "They want the memory tech too badly." They sprinted past a junction where a grate filtered the gray light from the surface. Above, the sound of sonic booms shook dust from the ceiling. The loyalist drones were hunting. They were sweeping the city sector by sector, looking for the broadcast source and the traitors who had initiated it. "We need to reach the sunken harbor," Lyra commanded. It is 3 miles north. 3 miles? Jax groaned. In these shoes? I am going to write a very sternly worded letter to the Municipal Planning Committee when this is over. Keep moving, Elias said, shoving Jax gently forward, or the only thing you will be writing is your own epitaph. The sunken harbor was a secret that predated House Vane. It was located inside a secondary crater lake, hidden beneath a holographic camouflage field that made the water look like solid rock from the air. They reached the access ledge and looked down. Elias stopped, his mouth falling open. The harbor was not a dock made of metal and plastic. It was a coral reef. Massive, spiraling structures of calcified bone and bioluminescent tissue rose from the dark water. And growing from these structures like fruit on a vine were ships. They were bioships, grown rather than built. Their hulls were curved and pearlescent, pulsing with a faint, rhythmic light. They looked more like sleeping sea creatures than interstellar vessels. I thought these were a myth, Elias whispered. The living fleet of the first era. My family stopped growing them 500 years ago, Lyra said, climbing down the ladder toward the water's edge. They were too independent, too hard to control. But the automated tenders have kept the nursery alive. They ran along the coral walkways, the water lapping at their boots. The air here was warm and humid, smelling of salt and life, a stark contrast to the sterile, recycled air of the palace. Most of them are dead, Jax noted, pointing to a row of gray, calcified hulls. They starved without pilots to bond with. Here, Lyra called out. She stopped in front of a small scout-class vessel. It was shaped like a teardrop, its hull shifting between shades of azure and teal. It was small, scarred, and looked half wild, but the biolights along its flank were steady. Elias approached it cautiously. He placed his hand on the hull. The ship shivered under his touch, a ripple of warmth spreading through the material. It's warm, Elias said. It feels like a horse, a really big metallic horse. Can you fly it? Lyra asked. Elias looked at the interface port, a membrane of shifting light near the cockpit. I am an engineer, he said, pulling out his tools. I can fly a brick if I put enough thrust behind it. But this is going to require some negotiation. He climbed inside. The cockpit was a fluid sack of gel and neural links, nothing like the joystick and throttle setups of human ships. Elias grimaced. He started splicing his own datapad into the ship's nervous system, bypassing the telepathic requirements with raw code. It is rejecting the navigation subroutines, Elias yelled from inside. It wants a genetic key. Trick it, Lyra shouted, watching the sky. The camouflage field above them was flickering. The fleet was scanning the crater. Elias worked furiously, sweat dripping from his nose. He grabbed a roll of conductive tape and a signal spoofer he had built from a drone processor. Okay, he muttered to the ship. Listen to me. You are not a majestic creature of the deep right now. You are a getaway car. Work with me. He jammed the spoofer into the neural node. The ship shuddered, groaned, and then the lights turned a solid, reddy green. Got it, Elias crowed. She is ugly. She is confused, but she is awake. What are you going to call her? Jax asked, climbing into the passenger webbing. A ship this temperamental needs a name. Elias patted the dashboard, which was sticky with biogel. The indestructible turnip, Elias declared. Lyra, who was scanning the perimeter, froze. She looked at Elias. The indestructible turnip, she repeated. Elias grinned. It is an earth root vegetable, ugly, tough, impossible to kill, just like us. Lyra looked at him, standing there covered in alien slime, proud of his vegetable ship. And then, For the first time in 20 years, she laughed. It wasn't the polite, courtly titter she had been trained to perform at parties. It was a real laugh, deep, ungraceful, and loud. It shook her shoulders. It made her eyes water. Elias watched her, his smile softening into something tender. "That is a good sound," he said quietly. Lyra wiped her eyes, still chuckling. "It is a terrible name. Elias, but I love it." They launched. The indestructible turnip did not roar. It screamed like a hawk as it tore free from the coral scaffold. They blasted through the holographic camouflage, shattering the illusion of the rock face and bursting into the open sky. Immediately, the threat warnings lit up the cockpit. "Multiple locks," Elias shouted, fighting the controls. The ship felt slippery in his hands, drifting like a living thing rather than banking like a machine. 3 loyalist interceptors peeled off from the high-altitude patrol and dove toward them. Laser fire sizzled through the air, boiling the water of the crater lake below. Lyra sat in the co-pilot seat, her hands flying over the communications array. "I need altitude," she shouted. "I cannot breach the jamming layer from down here." "Hold on to your stomach," Elias yelled. He pulled back on the yoke. The bioship groaned, its inertial dampeners lagging just enough to make them feel the G-force slam into their chests. They shot vertical, spinning in a tight corkscrew to dodge a volley of plasma bolts. One of the interceptors tried to follow the maneuver, but its engines stalled in the thick atmosphere. It fell away, tumbling. "The bioship is reacting to your stress levels," Jax yelled from the back, where he was bouncing around like a loose bird in a cage. "Stop being terrified. Elias, it is making the engine stutter." "I am not terrified," Elias yelled back, his voice cracking. "I am focused. There is a difference." They punched through the cloud layer and into the upper atmosphere. The sky turned from blue to the black of space. And there it was, the Fifth Fleet. 6 massive destroyers hung in orbit, their silhouettes blocking out the stars. They formed a hexagonal blockade, their weapons charged and pointing down at the planet. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. It was not just a blockade. It was an execution squad. "They are targeting the crater," Lyra whispered, reading the tactical scan. "They are going to vaporize the harbor to stop the launch. We have to transmit before they fire," Elias said. He leveled the ship, hiding in the magnetic shadow of a piece of space debris. Lyra initiated the uplink. She loaded the full data packet, the Truth Engine's recordings, the financial trails, the secret treaties with Earth and the Concordat, broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. Lyra said. The progress bar on the screen crawled forward. 10%, 20%. A voice broke through the static on the comms. It was cold, imperious, and terrifyingly familiar. Unidentified vessel. "This is Admiral Kren of the Fifth Fleet. You are in violation of the planetary quarantine. Power down your engines and prepare for boarding, or you will be incinerated." Lyra looked at the audio visualizer. The signal was originating from the flagship, the Invictus. "They are jamming the transmission," Elias said. "The upload speed just dropped to 0. We can't punch through their firewall." Lyra looked at the massive ships. They were steel behemoths, weapons of war designed to crush rebellion through fear. "They expect us to fight with guns," Lyra said softly. She unbuckled her harness. "What are you doing?" Elias asked. "I'm going to talk to them," Lyra said. She reached for the headset. "Lyra," Jax warned, "Kren is a fanatic. He served with your grandfather. He won't listen, and Kren won't." Lyra agreed, but his crew might. She opened a channel. Not a private hail to the Admiral, but a wideband broadcast on the fleet's internal tactical frequency, the channel used by every pilot, gunner, and engineer in the formation. "This is Lyra Vane," she said. Her voice was steady, stripped of the royal affectation, stripped of the fear. I am speaking to the officers and crew of the Fifth Fleet. I am speaking to the men and women who swore an oath to protect this world. On the bridge of the Invictus, Admiral Kren slammed his fist on the console. Cut her feed. You have been told that I am sick, Lyra's voice continued, echoing on every deck, in every helmet. You have been told I am compromised, but you have seen the footage. You have seen the sleep coffins. You have seen the crest of my family on the sides of the transports. The technicians on the bridge hesitated. Their hands hovered over the mute buttons. They had seen the footage. Everyone had. My father told you that we were the gardeners, Lyra said. He told you that the humans were weeds. But look at the ship I am flying. It is piloted by a human who risked his life to save our history when my father tried to burn it. In the cockpit of the indestructible turnip, Elias watched her. He saw the way her hands shook slightly, the only sign of the immense pressure she was under. He saw the woman who had lost everything, her name, her home, her identity, and found something stronger in the wreckage. I am renouncing the name Vane, Lyra declared. The words hung in the silence of the void. I am no longer the daughter of the High Council. I am a witness. And I am asking you, not as your princess, but as a citizen, do not fire on your own people. Do not be the monsters they want you to be. Silence stretched across the frequency. Then, a new voice crackled through. It was a mid-level gunnery sergeant from one of the escort destroyers. Targeting solution locked on the bioship, the sergeant said. Orders. Sir? Lyra closed her eyes. Stand down, the sergeant said. Admiral Kren's voice exploded over the comms. Mutiny, I will have you executed. Fire, all ships, fire. The Invictus fired. A lance of red plasma erupted from its prow, aimed directly at the indestructible turnip. Elias slammed the thrusters. The bioship rolled, the plasma bolt searing past them so close the hull screamed from the heat. They are splintering, Elias shouted. 2 ships are standing down, but the flagship is still engaging. We can't survive a direct hit from a dreadnought. Lyra looked at the planet below. She looked at the ring of ancient satellites that orbited the equator. The atmospheric mirror rings. They were ancient tech, designed to deflect solar flares and stabilize the weather. Elias, Lyra said, her mind racing. The mirror rings. Can you access them? They are weather stabilizers, Elias said. They are just giant glass lenses. Refraction, Lyra shouted. If we angle them, we can create a sensor ghost. We can make the fleet's targeting computers see 10,000 ships instead of 1. Elias's eyes went wide. That is crazy. That is stupid. I love it. He dove the ship toward the nearest ring satellite. He threw the comms open to the satellite's maintenance port. I need 30 seconds, Elias yelled, typing code with one hand and flying with the other. The Invictus was turning, bringing its broadside batteries to bear, the space around them filled with flak. Lyra reached out and placed her hand over Elias's hand on the throttle. If this does not work, she whispered, I am glad it was you. Elias looked at her. He didn't offer to surrender. He didn't try to be a martyr. He squeezed her hand. It will work, he said, because I am not letting this story end here. He hit the enter key. Activate refraction protocol. The mirror rings, dormant for 1,000 years, woke up. They spun on their gyroscopes, their massive crystalline surfaces catching the light of the sun. But instead of deflecting solar wind, they angled toward the fleet. The targeting sensors of the Invictus were suddenly flooded with light. The single signal of the indestructible turnip fractured. On the Admiral's screen, 1 ship became 2, then 4, Then 1,000. The sky was filled with a phantom fleet. "What is happening?" Kren screamed. "Which one is real?" The targeting computers shrieked, unable to lock. The automated defense systems panicked, firing wildly into empty space, chasing ghosts. In the confusion, Elias punched the throttle. The indestructible turnip slipped through the gap in the blockade, vanishing into the deep shadow of the planet's moon. "We are clear!" Lyra shouted. "Signal is penetrating." With the blockade sensors blinded by the refraction, the jamming field faltered. The data packet surged through. Upload complete. The truth hit the galactic network. It didn't just go to the neighbors. It went to Earth. It went to the Concordat. It went to the independent news guilds. The conspiracy was out. On the bridge of the Invictus, the mutiny spread. Officers looked at the data flooding their screens, the undeniable proof of their leader's crimes. They looked at the Admiral, who was still screaming for blood. "Sir," the executive officer said, drawing his sidearm, "relieve yourself of duty." The collapse of House Vane was not a slow decline. It was a landslide, with the blockade broken and the truth exposed. The external government scrambled to distance themselves. They issued condemnations, promised investigations, and froze the Vane assets, anything to hide their own complicity. On Valerian, the arrest orders were issued not by the council but by the people. The memory labs were breached. Lyra landed the indestructible turnip in the plaza outside the facility, the hull smoking and scarred. She walked out, not as a conqueror, but as a survivor. The doors to the lab were open. People were stumbling out into the sunlight, blinking, confused, terrifyingly fragile. They were the processed ones, the people whose minds had been half-eaten by the machine. Lyra walked among them. She saw the baker from the merchant district. The woman looked at Lyra with vague, unfocused eyes. Lyra stopped in front of her. She didn't offer excuses. She didn't say, "I didn't know." "I am sorry," Lyra said, her voice thick with tears. "I am so sorry." The baker blinked. Recognition flickered slowly in her gaze. She didn't smile. She didn't forgive. But she nodded. It was a start. Elias stood back, watching her. He knew what this cost her. She was taking the weight of her entire bloodline onto her shoulders. Jax walked up beside him, holding a data pad with the latest news feeds. "Varric is in solitary," Jax said. "The provisional government is forming. They want Lyra to lead it. She won't take it," Elias said. "No," Jax agreed. "She won't. She destroyed the throne. She isn't going to sit on the wreckage." 3 days later, the city was quiet. It was a fragile, bruised silence, but it was real. Lyra stood at the ceremonial gate of the inner ring, the massive holographic sign that had defined her world for 20 years. "Humans aren't allowed here," was sputtering. The projector was damaged, the power feed cut. Elias walked up beside her. He was wearing a clean flight suit, though he still had a smudge of grease on his chin that Lyra suspected was permanent. "The ship is fueled," Elias said. "The biocore has fully bonded with the navigation drive. It's ready to go." "Where?" Lyra asked, looking at the dying sign. "Anywhere," Elias said. "There are a lot of stars, Lyra. And now that the conspiracy is exposed, and there are going to be a lot of governments trying to cover their tracks. They're going to need someone to keep them honest." Lyra looked at him. She looked at the chaotic, messy, beautiful city she had helped liberate. "I do not know who I am without this place," she admitted softly. Elias took her hand. His grip was warm, solid, and real. "You are Lyra," he said. "You are the woman who chose the truth when it was easier to lie. You are the woman who saved my life." He smiled, a crooked, boyish grin. and you are the co-pilot of the indestructible turnip. That is a pretty prestigious title. Lyra laughed. It was easier this time. Lighter. She looked up at the gate. The sign flickered one last time. The letters "humans aren't allowed here" distorted, turned into static, and then vanished. The space where the law had been was empty. It was a blank glow, waiting for something new to be written. Lyra squeezed Elias's hand. "Let's go," she said. They turned away from the palace and walked toward the ship. They didn't look back. They walked into the wide, open dark of the universe, not as royalty and commoner, not as alien and human, but as partners in the dangerous, beautiful business of being free.